Okay, so I wasn't going to do this, but I just sat and watched the whole interview that he did with News Nation, and it's obvious that we have to break this interview down. I mean, the short of it, we could just say lie, 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 but there's a couple of things in that interview that really need to be touched on and exposed, really. But before I do that, I want to read to you an expert, what experts say about deception. So ForensicCollege.com says the 10 signs that someone is lying. This was in December of 2023 when they wrote this. So here are the 10 signs. And the reason why I want to tell you these 10 signs is because, one, if you've watched the interview, and two, if you listen to these bullet points, you will see and hear the deception. Change in speech patterns, irregular speech. It'll be a change in speech by speaking faster, and the best way to identify that is if you've heard them speak normal before, and we have on the altar. Number two, using non-congruent gestures. So, for example, if you're saying yes, but you're doing this, that's what that means. Or if you're saying no, that's what that means. Your body is saying the opposite of what you're saying. Not saying enough, giving few details, absence of descriptive words. Now, I know that you're probably all saying, well, that's all he's been doing is talking, and that's true. But if you listen to what he says, it's not very descriptive. It doesn't vary. It's always the same. She didn't take her meds. She didn't take her meds. She didn't take her meds. She would have taken her meds. She should have taken her meds. It's always that story with no proof. Remember that. Except 2 pill bottles that were double labeled. Number 4, saying too much. On the flip side, stretching the truth with the wrong words, excessive detail to convince themselves or others of what they're saying. Other cues is speaking in the third person, like he, she, or they, instead of, I or me, Number 5, unusual rise or fall in vocal tone. In lie detection, people tend to speak with a higher pitch, a higher vocal pitch. That's when they're lying. In research, the only time in deception that the voice will lower is if you're Hispanic, if you're speaking Spanish or a Hispanic language. We could see he's not speaking Spanish, so that does not apply to JP. Number 6, direction of eyes. Now, it's been debunked that if you look to the left, you're lying. That has been debunked. True. However, they did a research study in 2015 where 70 out of 120 participants lied while maintaining eye contact. Now, see, I'm looking at you right now, but I'm also looking at the book. I may look to the side or up or whatever when I'm thinking of something. But if I'm strongly maintaining eye contact, excessive eye contact while trying to convince you of something, that can be a sign of deception. Number 7, covering eyes or mouth. And covering up a lie, one may put their hands over their eyes or their mouth. Excessive fidgeting, like licking lips, looking at their nails, or fidgeting with their hands. We saw that in the interview. Number 9, finger pointing, literal and figuratively. Pointing towards someone else to shift focus, especially if they change from a hostile demeanor, like very upset or very shook up, to a speech that is measured during the time that they're finger pointing. We've seen that too. And number 10, self-identifying somebody who's a good liar, people who've told little lies to friends and colleagues, and during that time, they only focus on simple, clear stories. It is simple and clear what he says. It never really, there's no real descriptive, Dr. So-and-so or nurse this. You never hear like names of facilities. It's always very vague, very simple, very deceptive. Okay, so let's go into the actual interview. So these are the bullet points I wanted to point out. I didn't do the whole interview because it's just all lies anyway, but let's just go into what he said. So in the beginning, the interviewer says, why speak now? So he says he finally got approval from his attorneys who are working on a defamation case to speak because they're collecting evidence. The emotions have died down. Well, let's break that down for a minute. Now, first of all, defamation Okay, it's in definition. So any lawyer at this point that would be seeking defamation on anybody is probably going to ruin their career, because it's this man who's given all that information, and it's proven there's plenty of material and documentation that it came from him. So they'll lose. In definition, it's communicating false statements to a third party that harm a reputation. A lot of what has been reported has either come from JP, came from police reports, or came from Micah. These were not made up. Okay. Now, what are the things that have been reported on? Well, cheating and adultery. He's actually admitted to that. Stalking. He showed up at Honda. She said, "Walk away." And he said as he's walking away, "Well, I'm going to put your pictures on Facebook," which is the next one, putting nude photos of her on the internet. He's now trying to backtrack and say it was of him, of her and that guy, but no, because he's admitted to this. Abuse. It's been reported that he abused her. There's police reports to back that up. And there's no proof to show where he was on the 27th. We've been saying that all along. He doesn't want to show proof. He says he's been at restaurants and gas stations and dinner and whatnot. Has nothing to do with showing the identity of anybody else. These are receipts. You can easily get that. If you don't have a paper receipt, you can easily get that from your bank or credit card. So finally allowing him to speak. Okay. Well, you know, one of the reasons why I'm even on here, or even started, was because weeks ago he started making videos on TikTok through True Crime Ray. And I don't know if it was another channel, but I do know it's True Crime Ray, and where he was, you know, blaming the Francis family and constantly pushing this medication thing. So that was him. He has been talking for a long time. He wasn't just allowed to talk. He's been doing it for a long time. He also did a 2-hour interview with Flo that we know about. Sun Paper has done plenty of articles on him so far that they got emails from him. That's where they got the information from, and they reported on it in their newspaper, and just did a video interview, which we all watched. So he wasn't just allowed to talk. He's a liar. And now he's doing what News Nation. Emotions died down. Actually, it's the opposite. Okay, they've actually increased since the protesters were assaulted by his elder. Okay, so he's asked, "Did you see this coming?" from the interviewer. He says, "I told them for years if she gets off her medication, suicide was the next thing. Because when she was with me, she was okay. When she was with me, she was happy and healthy." Alrighty. It was JP himself who had said she attempted 7 times. 7 times while being with him. If that be true, that's not a sign of being happy and healthy. She also filed for divorce and a protection order. And it's not just the first time she filed for divorce. This has happened before. That's not signs of happy and healthy. There are 2 police reports, one from a neighbor and one from Micah directly, that shows that you were abusive to her. She said you had your arms around her neck. The neighbor said that you beat her. That's not happy and healthy. You said you tried to prevent, JP says he tried to prevent her from getting a gun because he didn't want her to harm herself. However, Tim Carter, a friend of Micah's, used to be a friend of JP's, had stated on the news months ago that JP said to him he was worried that Micah was going to get a gun to shoot JP. Not herself, JP. Line number 7,455. Okay. What was going on the week that Micah died? The interviewer asks. He said the entire week he kept emailing her. So he was harassing her. This is harassing. You know she doesn't want to have anything to do with you. She's moved out. She's moving on. She's making videos on Facebook making it clear she wants nothing to do with you. She's avoiding you. She said, "Walk away" in that video, and yet you're emailing and emailing. So you just admitted it. Thank you very much. Hope your lawyers can handle that. Then he avoids going any further about that week, of course. You know, because it's obvious why. And then he goes into double agents were following her, making her sound like she's psychotic. Meanwhile, he's actually admitted that he's hired a private investigator. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Flying Monkeys did it also, because, they lick his boots. Now he says that she lost 40 pounds in a month. Okay, now anyone who knew her at that time, there's not been one mention by friends or family that this happened to her, but let's just talk about it. In her death certificate, it says she was 140. Okay, so she had to have been 180 pounds and lost 40. Does anybody have any pictures of Micah at 180 pounds? I haven't seen any. He says her videos on Facebook, she's speaking in a different cadence, different tone, because she wasn't on her meds. Of course she was. She was no longer being medicated by something she didn't need. So she was coherent. She was healthy. She was happy. She was away from JP. This was a Freudian slip on JP. Please listen and find it, because it's shortly after that last question, where he says if somebody loved her, and he's talking about the family and friends, if somebody loved her enough to take her to a professional saying that she was abused, and then he moves on that she needed medication, he said abused. He just told on himself. So if she was truly sick, she truly unalived herself, he just admitted he abused her in that Freudian slip. He says at probate court, they said Micah is mentally ill and needs her medication. He says, let's do it. Who's they? The judge? Why would the judge say that about her? Did she have a psychotic break in the courtroom? You have any documentation to show that? Who told you? The bailiff? The bailiff told you she was mentally ill? Please. Where were you when Micah died? The interviewer asks. Okay. He says Charleston. All day Saturday. Soccer, dinner, shopping, got gas, but had the time to send her 4 emails. But he was so upset because the emails were sent to her after she passed. How did you know that? I mean, maybe you found out later, but how'd you know that? That's really weird. But either way, let's remember what the neighbor said in the May 1st 911 call. Okay, remember, there's been no protests, been no reporting. This hasn't spread out. This story was very local. That he thought, or they thought, the neighbors, that she was killed in Charleston. So the interviewer says, you have any documentation of, being there on that day, on the 27th? His voice rises and says, of course! It doesn't elaborate where or what documentation he has. When he talks about the emails, by the way, his voice crackles. Now he brings up Dick's pawn shop pictures. And in a high-pitched increase in his voice pitches an increase. The voice pitches an increases in pitch, rather, sorry. He says she was euphoric. She was smiling. Okay. To us, who are really paying attention and don't need to lie about anything, she looked worried, concerned, looking over her shoulder. Does that sound euphoric? Now, he says a friend 2 years prior had heard from Micah. Micah had told this friend that if she ever ends her life, it'll be at Lumberton. Now, her family said, no, everybody said that she's never been there before. There was no connection to Lumberton. Okay. This same friend, JP says this, his words, same friend, shortly after Micah's passing, was seen in a picture. Robbie Harvey was the one who got these photos. He blames Robbie Harvey for everything. These photos of him and this friend, and then just went off and went into her past and dug up and just embarrassed her and really upset her. I don't remember any other friend than Susie Skinner being in any photo with him. Why would Micah tell Susie Skinner 2 years prior that if she ever offed herself, it was going to be at Lumberton Park? I find that a little interesting. He says after she got out of the hospital, he said that he for the next 3 months, as if he knew she was only going to be around for 3 months, the next 3 months he was going to do everything he can to save her. Okay. This is what he did to save her. Put her boobs on Facebook, stalked her, harassed her, hired a PI, put deflation devices in her tires. And I'm sure there's much more if we sit here and really think about the things that he's done to her to help her, to save her. Now, he says the detective called him that night. The night that, because an interviewer goes, how did you find out? You know, who called you? And he says it was a detective. He can't remember. And all of a sudden, he can't remember. He can remember medications. He can remember why she had to go into. He can remember all of the facts that he wants to remember. But this particular fact, he can't remember. So he says, the interviewer says, well, what did they tell you on the phone? What did they say to you? He goes off the subject and elaborates on how he reacted, how he threw up, and that he ate something and it was red. You remembered what you ate and what color it was, but you don't remember what a detective told you about your wife's death? So what he does remember is that a family member that was there that night, allegedly, called the hospital and called the morgue. Now, number one, anybody who's ever worked in the health profession knows this is untrue. And over the phone, this nurse at the morgue, no, nurses don't work in a morgue, but okay, gave him a list reading off what happened. They were able to confirm that Micah was in the morgue. And the list was suicide, with the weapon that was used, where it happened, and different facts. That's a lie. And if I'll tell you what, if that morgue and that hospital did that, there needs to be a lawsuit against them because I've never heard of such a thing. Why would they even tell him that? They haven't even established why she passed away, unless they really already have and knew why ahead of time. He says then, shortly after, he called the detective and said, is this true, what the morgue said? He doesn't remember what the detective said. He doesn't remember. Maybe he was very upset, or maybe he hung up. He doesn't remember. But he remembers that he ate something red that night and threw it up. Okay. Now, he refers to everybody that's been reporting on this as the Scooby-Doo mystery machine. Okay. And finds it annoying that we're all, trying to seek justice and find answers. He wants us to let her be at peace. Stop investigating. Just let it be, just leave it alone. Let her memory rest. Basically saying, stop looking into it. This is what I want people to think. And you're getting in the way. You're interrupting my narrative. That's what he's saying. So the interviewer is going, don't you want to know what happened to her? I mean, remember, he said JP's words. So remember this attorneys who are working on the defamation lawsuit from Fantasyland, that he came out and did a video, and plenty of content creators have a copy, where he said, we're going to get justice for Micah. We're going to find out what happened to her. Well, that's what we're doing. Now you change your mind? Because it got uncomfortable for you. That's why you changed your mind. So when the interviewer says, don't you want to know what happened to your wife? He goes into like a trance to think about his answer. Comes back to earth and says, are you trying to ask me if somebody murdered my wife? So he says, the interviewer, do you think somebody murdered your wife? And with a high-pitched tone, he goes, no! And a little smirk, like Mickey Mouse, he sounds like. A little smirk. It almost looks like he's trying to control that smile. So it's just little thing on the side. Watch it if you haven't already. It's on YouTube. Full interview. Now, the interviewer asks him about when he made his announcement. He says, why did you make that announcement? Because obviously that's what sparked the whole suspicion and investigation. Public and law enforcement, obviously. And he says he made the announcement because he didn't want anyone to think she was a bad person. He wanted to protect her image. Okay. But in that announcement, what does he say about Micah? That she committed suicide. She didn't take her meds. Funeral next week. Well, awesome protection of her reputation. That's fabulous. I could see where you were trying to protect her. Why tell people... I'm sorry. He says, why did you tell people not to talk about it? I didn't want anybody to talk about my wife. Blaming Christians and congregants that they're all gossips and all they're going to want to do is talk. No, all they're going to want to do is get answers because it was suspicious from the beginning. The rest of the interview was just lie, and I got tired of listening to it. And so I stopped. But these were the points I wanted to make. He's got to stop interviewing because he's pretty much telling on himself. There's no lawyer in the world that is going to ruin their reputation and their career by trying to put a defamation lawsuit on anyone who's reporting on the very things that either A, JP has said himself, B, that Micah said herself, and C, that are in police reports. You already lost the case before you even walked in the courtroom. Okay, so let's go to scripture now. What does God say? Psalm 107:7. No one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house. No one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes. I don't know how many warnings you got to get, JP. I don't know how many warnings you're going to get. He doesn't even want you to be before his eyes because you're a liar. So, there you go. I'm sure I will see you soon. And everyone, God bless.